In this video, we tell the astonishing true story of a man who spent 60 years of his life aboard a sailboat and made one final, unforgettable decision. At 84 years old, he turned his back on land for good, choosing to spend his last days where? He always felt most alive, on the high seas, but what really happened out there? Was it peaceful? Or something else entirely? This isn't just a story about a sailor, it's a story about commitment, solitude, and the sea's relentless power. We'll take you through his journey, his preparations, and the emotional, unpredictable events that followed as he sailed towards his final horizon. Whether you're a sailor, a dreamer, or someone who simply wonders what drives a person to live and die at sea, this video will leave you thinking. Stay with us as we explore the legacy of a man who lived for the ocean and never looked back. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon if you love powerful stories from the sailing world. Let's set sail. The sea was Eric Johansson's first love, its endless expanse whispering promises of freedom to a boy born in 1945 on Sweden's rugged west coast. Growing up in a small fishing village near Gothenburg, Eric spent his childhood watching fishing boats bob in the harbor, their masts swaying like metronomes against the gray Nordic sky. At 10, he learned to sail a clinker-built dinghy, feeling the tiller's pulse under his small hands as the wind filled the single sail. By 16, he was crewing on keelboats in the Baltic, his blue eyes scanning the horizon for squalls, his mind already dreaming of oceans beyond. The sea wasn't just water to Eric, it was a living thing, a force that shaped his soul. At 20, he bought his first boat, a 28-foot sloop, and began coastal voyages. But it wasn't enough. The world called, and in 1975, at 30, he stepped aboard the vessel that would define his life, a Hallberg-Rossi 41 named Viking Spirit. This 41-foot ketch, with its sleek fiberglass hull and teak deck, wasn't just a boat. It was his home, his sanctuary, his companion for the next 50 years. What drove a man to live 6 decades on the water, to face storms and solitude, and to choose the high seas as his final resting place? The answer lies in the salt-stained pages of Eric's life, a story of technical mastery, relentless adventure, and a heart tethered to the ocean's rhythm. The Viking Spirit was a masterpiece of Swedish engineering. Built by Hallberg-Rossi, the 41-foot ketch was designed by Ola Enderlein for blue water cruising, with a displacement of 9.9 tons and a lead keel weighing 3.8 tons for stability in heavy seas. Its ketch rig, with a mainmast and smaller mizzen, offered versatility, allowing Eric to balance sails in everything from light breezes to gale-force winds. The boat's 84 square meters of sail area, split between a Genoa, jib, and occasional spinnaker, gave him options for every point of sail. Below deck, the teak-lined cabin was compact but functional. A small galley, a chart table, a single berth, and storage for spares and provisions. The heart of the boat was its Volvo Penta MD-21A, a 75-horsepower diesel engine, though Eric rarely used more than 45 horsepower, reliable for maneuvering in tight harbors or powering through calms. He equipped the boat with a wind vane for self-steering, a necessity for solo passages, and later added solar panels and a wind generator for energy independence. Eric knew every inch of Viking Spirit, from the rigging's tension to the hull's gel coat thickness. He treated it like a living partner, checking for osmosis yearly, sanding and reapplying anti-fouling paint, and replacing standing rigging every decade to prevent failure at sea. Eric's first circumnavigation began in 1975, a 2-year odyssey that set the tone for his life. He departed Gothenburg in late summer, the Baltic Sea's choppy waters giving way to the North Sea's unpredictable swells. His route followed the trade winds, south to the Canary Islands, then west across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. The transatlantic crossing tested his skills, Navigating with a sextant and paper charts, GPS was still a decade away. He plotted his course by the stars, calculating his position with a precision that awed other sailors. The Viking Spirit handled 20-foot swells with grace, its keel slicing through waves, while Eric reefed the mainsail to maintain control. In the Caribbean, he anchored in Barbados, the turquoise waters a stark contrast to Sweden's gray seas. Locals marveled at his solitary arrival, a young man with salt-crusted clothes and a quiet smile. From there, he transited the Panama Canal, a logistical challenge requiring precise timing to navigate the locks. The Pacific stretched before him, vast and humbling, its trade winds pushing Viking spirit toward the Marquesas Islands. He sailed 4,000 miles non-stop, 30 days of solitude, battling fatigue and a leaking water pump he repaired with spares mid-ocean. In Tahiti, he traded stories with other cruisers, his technical knowledge earning respect. He spoke of sail trim, explaining how he adjusted the Genoa's clue to reduce heeling in strong winds, and shared tips on maintaining a diesel engine in humid climates. The Pacific wasn't always kind. Near the Tuamotus, Eric misjudged a pass and nearly grounded Viking spirit on a coral reef. The tide was falling, and the boat's keel grazed the coral, sending a shudder through the hull. Heart pounding, he kedged off using an anchor, a maneuver requiring calm precision under pressure. It was a lesson in humility, one of many the sea taught him. From Polynesia, he sailed to Australia, docking in Sydney to refit the boat. He replaced worn halyards, inspected the mast for corrosion, and treated the hull for early signs of osmosis, a common issue in fiberglass boats of that era. The journey continued through the Torres Strait, a narrow passage fraught with currents and shoals, then across the Indian Ocean to Sri Lanka. There, he encountered monsoon rains, navigating by radar and instinct when visibility dropped to zero. Rounding the Cape of Good Hope, he faced the roaring 40s, where 40-knot winds and 30-foot waves tested Viking spirit's hull and Eric's nerve. He hove to for 2 days, the boat riding the swells like a cork while he rested below, trusting his wind vane to keep course. The Atlantic brought him home to Gothenburg in 1977, a changed man, his hands calloused, his mind sharpened by 2 years of challenges. Eric's life wasn't just about sailing. It was about mastering the sea's demands. He became a student of meteorology, studying grid files and barometric pressure to predict weather windows. He learned to read the sea's surface, spotting squalls by ripples on the water or shifts in cloud patterns. His navigation evolved with technology. By the 1990s, he integrated GPS and chart plotters, though he never abandoned his sextant, calling it the sailor's truest friend. He upgraded Viking Spirit's electronics, installing an AIS transponder to avoid collisions with freighters and a satellite communicator for emergencies. Maintenance was a ritual. He carried spare impellers, fuel filters, and even a backup alternator, knowing that self-sufficiency was survival. In remote anchorages, he dived to inspect the propeller, scraping off barnacles with a knife. Once, in the Maldives, he repaired a cracked rudder stock using epoxy and a makeshift brace, a fix that held for 3,000 miles until he reached a shipyard. His second circumnavigation, in the 1980s, took a bolder route, south around Cape Horn, the sailor's Everest. The Drake Passage was a crucible, with 50-knot winds and rogue waves that could capsize a poorly handled boat. Eric prepared meticulously, reinforcing Viking Spirit's rigging and stowing gear to prevent shifting. He sailed close-hauled, tacking against the wind, the ketch rig's mizzen sail providing balance. The Horn rewarded him with a rare, calm day, the cliffs of Tierra del Fuego looming like sentinels. But the sea's mercy was fleeting. Days later, a storm tore his jib, forcing him to sew a patch by hand under the dim glow of a headlamp. The repair held, a testament to his foresight in carrying a sail repair kit. From Cape Horn, he sailed to the Falklands, then up the Atlantic to Brazil, where he spent months exploring the Amazon Delta, navigating shallow rivers with a lead line to measure depth. Eric's life wasn't without loss. In his 40s, he married Anna, a fellow sailor who joined him for a Pacific crossing. Their love was forged in shared sunsets and stormy nights. But Anna's death from illness in 1995 left Eric alone again. The sea became his solace, its vastness absorbing his grief. He wrote in his log, "The ocean doesn't judge, it just carries you." Friends urged him to settle ashore, but Eric refused. Viking spirit was his home, its creaking timbers a familiar voice. He sailed on, crossing the Indian Ocean again, this time dodging pirates off Somalia by sailing dark, extinguishing all lights and relying on dead reckoning. In the Red Sea, he navigated the narrow Bab el-Mandeb Strait, avoiding militia boats by hugging the coast. Each challenge honed his skills, from splicing lines under pressure to jury-rigging a broken boom with a spare pole. By the 2000s, Eric was a legend among cruisers, known for his quiet expertise. In Fiji, he helped a stranded sailor rebuild a seized engine, teaching him to clean injectors with improvised tools. In New Zealand, he mentored a young couple, showing them how to balance a catch rig for long passages. His logbooks, filled with precise notes on sail trim and engine hours, were a Bible of blue water sailing. Yet Eric remained humble, always learning. He studied modern composites, upgrading Viking Spirit's deck fittings with carbon fiber reinforcements. He installed a water maker, reducing reliance on shore supplies, and fine-tuned the wind vane to handle crosswinds better. His boat was a living project, evolving with each decade. The sea wasn't always a friend. In 2010, crossing the Pacific, Eric hit a submerged container, a hazard of modern oceans. The impact cracked Viking Spirit's hull, water seeping into the bilge. Alone 1,000 miles from land, he activated his bilge pump and patched the crack with epoxy and fiberglass cloth, working in rolling seas. The repair held, but the ordeal left him shaken, a reminder of the sea's unpredictability. He carried an EPIRB and a life raft, but his philosophy was clear. The boat is your life raft. Keep it strong. He reached the Marquesas, where he hauled out Viking Spirit for a proper repair, grinding down the hull and applying new laminate. As Eric aged, his voyages grew reflective. In his 60s, he sailed the Northwest Passage, a route once choked with ice, but now navigable due to warming seas. The Arctic's stark beauty, glaciers calving into the sea, polar bears on distant shores, moved him deeply. He navigated using satellite imagery and ice charts, his experience guiding Viking Spirit through narrow channels. The passage was a triumph, but also a meditation on change, the melting ice a sign of a world shifting beneath him. In his 70s, he revisited favorite anchorages, the Azores, where he'd once weathered a hurricane, the Seychelles, where he'd swum with whale sharks, and Tonga, where he'd danced with locals under starlit skies. Each stop was a thread in the tapestry of his life, woven with technical skill and emotional weight. By 2025, at 80, Eric felt the weight of his years. His hands, gnarled from decades of hauling lines, still moved with precision, but his body tired faster. Friends in Gothenburg urged him to retire ashore, but Eric's heart was elsewhere. He'd lived for the sea, and he'd die there too. He provisioned Viking Spirit for one last voyage, checking every system, the rigging, the engine's fuel lines, the solar panels' output. His plan was simple: sail to the Azores, then the Caribbean, revisiting the waters that shaped him. As he cast off, the harbor faded behind him, and the open sea stretched ahead. What would his final journey hold? Would the ocean embrace him, as it always had, or would it demand one last test of the man who'd given it his life? The answer lay beyond the horizon, in the heart of the Viking spirit and the soul of Erik Johansen. The horizon stretched before Erik Johansen like an old friend, its line unbroken except for the faint smudge of the Azores on the third week of his final voyage. It was May 2025, and at 80, Erik's weathered hands gripped the tiller of Viking spirit, his Hallberg Rossi 41, with the same steady resolve that had carried him through 50 years of blue water sailing. The Ketch's sails were taut, the Genoa pulling strong in a 15-knot easterly, the mizzen trimmed to balance the boat's heel. The sea was calm, a rare gift in the North Atlantic, but Erik knew better than to trust it fully. He'd seen the ocean turn from glass to fury in hours, and his mind was already calculating the barometric pressure, 10 to 12 millibars, steady but hinting at a low forming to the west. His plan was to reach the Azores, refuel, and sail south to the Caribbean, where he'd chosen to end his days. The Viking spirit was ready, fuel tanks full, watermaker humming, solar panels charging the batteries. But as the sun dipped low, painting the sea gold, Erik felt a quiet certainty. This journey would be his last. What trials would the ocean throw at him before he met its embrace? And what legacy would he leave for the sailors who'd follow his wake? The Viking spirit was a marvel of endurance, its 41-foot fiberglass hull still sound after decades of salt and strain. Erik had maintained it with obsessive care, replacing the standing rigging in 2020 with 1 Gauss 19 stainless steel wire, checking every swage fitting for cracks. The Volvo Penta MD21A, now a relic at 75 horsepower, purred reliably, its injectors cleaned and fuel filters swapped before departure. He'd upgraded the boat's electronics in the 2010s, adding a modern chart plotter and AIS for collision avoidance, but kept his sextant aboard, a nod to the old ways. The wind vane, a custom-built model he'd tweaked over years, steered with precision, allowing him to rest during long passages. Below deck, the teak interior glowed under LED lights, a testament to his annual varnishing. Every system was checked: the bilge pump, the watermaker's membranes, the spare impeller stowed in a labeled box. Erik's mantra was simple: a boat is only as strong as its weakest part. He carried enough spares to rebuild half the vessel, from shackles to a backup alternator, knowing that self-reliance was his lifeline 1,000 miles from shore. Thus, passage to the Azores was deceptively smooth, the trade winds pushing Viking spirit at a steady 6 knots. Erik navigated by GPS but cross-checked with celestial fixes, using his sextant to shoot the sun at noon. His logbook, a leather-bound volume, worn soft by years, recorded every detail: wind speed, course corrections, engine hours. He noted a slight vibration in the propeller shaft, likely a barnacle buildup, and planned to dive and clean it in Horta. The Azores greeted him with green cliffs and a bustling marina, where he tied up at dusk. Locals recognized him, the gray-bearded sailor who had visited decades before and shared bottles of wine as he recounted tales of Cape Horn and Pacific storms. He spent a week in Horta, scraping the hull, topping off diesel, and inspecting the rudder for play. A young sailor, Maria, approached him, her eyes bright with ambition. She was planning her first Atlantic crossing and asked for advice. Erik spent hours sketching sail plans, explaining how to reef early in a squall and why a ketch rig like his excelled in heavy weather. "Trust your boat," he told her, "but never the sea." As he sailed out, Maria waved from the dock, unaware she'd carry his lessons across oceans. The Caribbean was Erik's final destination, a place of memories. Barbados, where he'd first anchored in 1975, Grenada, where he'd danced under palm trees, Antigua, where he'd weathered a hurricane in the 90s. He set course south, the Viking spirit slicing through 10-foot swells with the grace of a younger boat. But the Atlantic had one last test. 3 days out, the barometer dropped to 1998 millibars, and the sky turned leaden. A squall was coming, fast and fierce. Eric reefed the mainsail to its second point, furled the Genoa halfway, and secured the hatches. The storm hit at midnight, 40-knot winds howling, waves crashing over the bow. Viking Spirit climbed 20 foot, seas, its keel holding firm as Eric hand steered, muscles straining. A rogue wave slammed the port side, snapping a stanchion and flooding the cockpit. The bilge pump whirred, and Eric checked the hull for damage, finding only superficial cracks. In the Gelcoat, for 48 hours, he rode the storm, hove to when exhaustion set in, the wind vane keeping the boat's nose into the wind. As the skies cleared, he found his jib torn, a long rip along the luff. Under starlight, he stitched it by hand, his fingers, slow but sure, using a sailmaker's needle and waxed thread. The repair held, a small victory against the sea's wrath. The Caribbean welcomed him with turquoise waters and gentle trade winds. In Martinique, he anchored in a quiet cove, diving to inspect the propeller. The vibration was gone, the shaft clean. He swam among coral reefs, the weight of his years lifting. In the warm water, at night he wrote in his log, reflecting on 60 years afloat. "The sea gave me everything," he scrawled. "Freedom, pain, love, loss, it's my home, and I'll leave it here." He sailed on, island hopping, Dominica, St. Lucia, Bequia. Each stop a farewell. In Bequia, he met a group of young cruisers, sharing stories of the Northwest Passage and the Indian Ocean's pirate alleys. They marveled at his knowledge. How to balance a ketch in a beam reach, how to jury-rig a broken spreader, how to read a current's ripple to avoid a lee shore. He gave them his spare charts, annotated with decades of notes, a gift to the next generation. Eric's final days were spent in the Grenadines, where the sea sparkled like cut glass. He felt his strength fading, his breath shorter, but his spirit was calm. He'd chosen this end years ago after Anna's death, when the land held no pull. On a moonless night, anchored off Mayreau, he sat on deck, the Viking Spirit rocking gently. The stars were bright, the Milky Way a river of light. He wrote his last log entry, "I've sailed my course. The sea is my eternity. Let Viking Spirit carry my story." He secured the boat, checked the anchor road, and lay in his berth, the sound of waves against the hull his lullaby. Sometime that night, Eric slipped away, his heart stilled by the sea's rhythm. Weeks later, a fishing boat found Viking Spirit adrift, sails furled, systems intact. Eric's body was gone, likely given to the sea as he'd wished. His logbook lay open, the final entry a testament to a life lived fully. The news spread through the sailing world, from Gothenburg to Sydney, from Horta to Tahiti. Sailors toasted his name, calling him the last true Viking. Maria, the young sailor from the Azores, took his lessons across the Atlantic, naming her boat Spirit's Air. Viking Spirit was towed to Grenada, where it was donated to a sailing school, its teak decks and sturdy keel teaching new sailors the art of the sea. Eric's story became legend, a tale of technical mastery and unyielding love for the ocean, whispered in marinas and written in the wakes of those who followed. His life was a masterclass in blue water sailing, the precision of a reefed sail in a gale, the calm of a starshot fix, the ingenuity of a mid-ocean repair, but it was also a love story, not just with the sea, but with the freedom it offered. Eric faced storms, pirates, and solitude, yet never wavered. His legacy lives in every sailor who checks their rigging, reads the wind, or dreams of the horizon. The Viking Spirit sails on, not just in wood and fiberglass, but in the hearts of those who hear the sea's call and answer.